Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Scenic Route Astrology. My name is Makayla, and today we're covering the Mercury retrograde period that's happening in Virgo and Leo in 2024. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack for this Mercury retrograde because it's happening in two different archetypes. Okay, and there's just there's a lot going on. We've got this like potent full moon going on. We've got a couple of squares, T-squares going on in the sky. And it's just crazy times in the universe. So anyway, hopefully this is enlightening. Hopefully this gives you something to work with, something to reflect back in your own personal life, and also helps you unravel and untangle some of the themes that might be coming up for you personally. The first thing I want to do actually is unpack what Mercury represents as a planet, so that we can have a deeper understanding of, how this transit is playing out and what Mercury's function is essentially for. And then I also want to cover like basic stuff that happens under Mercury retrogrades that I think can be applied to every single time we have Mercury retrograde happening, which is 3 to 4 times a year for 3 or 4 weeks at a time. And then I'm going to get into this specific one and the transits, and I'll also pull up, of course, the astrology chart for people who like the visuals. Okay, so when we understand Mercury and its function in the natal chart and by transit, we understand that this is a planet that deals with communication. Okay, and its function essentially is to take information and process it through the left side of our brain, the logical side of our brain, into the right side of our brain, right? Which is where we get more of our creative, artistic sense of self-expression. Okay, so there's the logical and the non-logical. And Mercury's function is gathering ideas, right? Gathering thoughts, gathering opinions, also understanding the environment, like the media environment around itself, and trying to make the environment more coherent to understand. Okay. And Mercury does this in a dualistic way because it's actually has an affinity with two different archetypes, right? Both Gemini and Virgo, Mercury is associated with. They're both mutable archetypes, meaning, they can shift the pattern, they can change direction effortlessly, more easily. Those two archetypes are more prone to be shifting, right? And change the pattern the way it does things. And one is an air sign, Gemini, and one is an earth sign, Virgo. So there's this need for communication and connection, and just connection with other people, with friends, with communities, with partners, and so forth on the air side. And there's also a necessary need for the earth side to get more grounded and more practical with information that Mercury takes in, right? And make sense of things, essentially, and organize things in a more coherent way, right? Rather than having like a bunch of opinions, thoughts, ideas, or knowledge all scattered all over the place, which is what Mercury and Gemini's function is supposed to do. It's supposed to gather as much as it can. The Virgo side is then to process it and eliminate things for the soul or the individual in the Virgo process of what is true for the soul or the individual person itself, what's necessary, what's not, and essentially really what is most functional for the ultimate healing pattern for that soul, right? Or the healing journey for that soul. Okay. So, Mercury is going to go into an area of your chart by transit and also function this in your natal chart as picking up on things, right? As putting labels on things, right? Of understanding like, this is a can, right? And Mercury's function is labeling this as like a can. And then we essentially know what this does, right? The can holds the beverage. I should be doing like a infomercial for this right now. the can is essentially holding, right, the beverage. And so we label and we put some definition around, a said object or an idea or something, right? And in another sense too, Mercury deals with academics because, again, we're gathering information. And so we're gathering knowledge, and that knowledge helps us form our cosmology and our belief systems of our personal realities and how we think, the world works, right? Our personal world works, right? And that's pulling in the opposite of the Gemini, like the Sagittarius, right? That Sag-Gemini axis, which really deals with, communication and opinions and gathering insights and then forming our larger cosmology and the thoughts and belief systems that we choose to really live our life by, right? Our ethics by, essentially. Okay, so there's an instinct for Mercury to want to gather diverse opinions and ideas and information. Okay, there's an instinct for it to want to assimilate that eventually in a place that makes sense, that's logical, that's practical for like us as an individual at that point to understand on a more comprehensive level and on a deeper level. Okay, so when we have Mercury retrogrades now, what that's essentially is like the planet is actually not moving retrograde, right? It's the speed of the planet slowing down, and essentially it looks, because the Earth begins to move faster than the planet Mercury itself, it looks like it's going backwards in the sky, right? But it's really actually not, but it appears that way. Okay, but there's a slowing down of that exterior output that Mercury usually does. And there's a pulling in when we have a retrograde planet, right? Especially with Mercury, there's a pulling in of the processing of all of the knowledge we've been gathering, right? All of the facts, all of the opinions, right? And the purpose is it's an inward acceleration of us individuals being able to process things and take in all of that thought, take in all of that info, and now reflect on it for ourselves and essentially create spaces for it or not, right? But this also becomes an acceleration process of individuation. So like thinking for yourself, having new revelations, right? One of the most important things, I think, is deconditioning from exterior influences that might have told us things or gave us information that wasn't true for us as an individual, right? As you as an individual, as me as an individual, and how maybe that conditioned you early on or throughout life, right? We are always, I think, in some way susceptible to being conditioned by media or close loved ones or, experiences that we have. Well, essentially, the Mercury retrograde is a time for you to review and revise, your mental process, your mind process, and where you're at right now in your journey. Okay. And how important is that to live by a more free mind? Okay. And the way I like to think about the mind essentially is having a part in our lifelong soul work and journey is that, the greater source and the better source to listen as an individual, trying to navigate, trying to align your life, trying to co-create with the universe and have the ultimate manifestation and basically just live in joy and freedom, is to listen to your natural body's instincts. Okay. And the mind is a function that we need, but quite often we allow the mind to control our sense of direction and sense of self and sense of self-worth. That becomes like deteriorating because the mind can also function in very silly ways if it has been conditioned to, believe you're not smart enough, right? You don't know enough. You're not good enough. You don't have this, you don't have that, right? When really, and then like from my human design perspective, the mind is meant to create our genius, and it's meant to share information out in the world, but it's not meant to assimilate a truth for you. Okay. It's meant to be more comprehensive, like comprehending the soul and where your body and your natural intuition and instincts are coming from, like from feelings, from gut reactions, from instinctual reactions, right? From your heart space. Okay. And when you get the body and the mind to start working together, and you realize that the mind does not control anything, right? Your soul does, and your heart space does, then you can really use these Mercury retrograde periods to do a lot of profound work and accelerate your evolution to becoming a higher functioning level of yourself, essentially, right? And you then using your genius in your mind to create work faster or more profound, or liberate yourself, or decondition yourself from limiting beliefs, right? Limiting thoughts, limiting ideas that have like been implanted by either, yourself, you as an individual beating yourself up in your mind, or maybe exterior influences conditioning your mind, right? And so when we get a retrograde time frame, which we do multiple times a year for a reason, it's a time to honestly like release the mind a bit, right? Review, revise, revisit. And oftentimes this means restructuring something, right? Restructuring a thought. And of course, it can be restructuring a project, a work thing you've been working on, right? Revisiting, maybe my website needs to be improved, right? Or maybe I thought I wanted to go and do this thing, but I don't anymore, right? Things can shift and change in your life under Mercury retrogrades. Quite often, we hear back from people from our past, and I'm going to say that's true from my experience and studying retrogrades for the last 4 years studying astrology. It doesn't matter what sign it's in, people from your past come back. Okay. And it's a personal choice. It's a case by case scenario. Absolutely. Whether, you should listen to them and keep an eye or an ear space open for them, or, or not, right? It's different for everybody, because it could be a karmic connection. It could be a personal connection. It could be somebody that you need to revisit your relationship with. It could be somebody that you need to revisit because you need to let it go, right? It's totally case by case, right? But, I do recommend that sometimes you're open to at least hear what somebody has to say. It doesn't mean that you have to accept it or invite it back in or let it go, but just be open to, the conversation, because you might get new information in that will help you shift, change, or alter, your pattern going forward once that Mercury begins to go direct. Okay. That's kind of like a deeper layer of thing I associate Mercury retrogrades with, because, evolutionary astrology really is about doing the deep inner emotional work, so that, you can liberate your soul, so that you can remove unconscious patterns that have been holding you back from other lifetimes, from achieving, what it is that your soul essentially desires, and like what your personal human blueprint is, right? Mapped out for you. This is why we use astrology. It is a magnificent tool for getting getting on the scenic route of like where we want to go, right? Surface level stuff though that happens too is travel, right? Travel mishaps, because Mercury, the Hermes and Greco-Roman mythology, he was a quick-footed traveler who could go into hell and heaven and be with the mortals on earth. And so we do associate Mercury in astrology with traveling. and, either short trips, long trips, just depends or whatever. But, we did just see over this last weekend, the whole Microsoft falling down, and causing hundreds of thousands of people to be delayed in certain parts of the world and airports, and just like a chaotic mess. And that was really because of the shadow period. We were in the Mercury retrograde shadow period, which I'll get to in a little bit, why that happened. And then I do have an example of a very powerful woman who is just in a pageant. I believe it was Kansas City, 2024 Kansas City pageant. And if you haven't seen this video of her speaking up on stage, this is another example of this specific Mercury retrograde showing up in the collective here, and it'll be examples of that, and I'll talk about that again in a little bit. But essentially, this woman called out her abuser, who had went into the audience and been in the audience the day of her pageant, and she called it out, saying, it's not comfortable and it's not appropriate, and I would like to go back to my community and make sure that, there are regulations and protocols essentially that keep us women safe and feeling like we are safe from our abusers. Okay. And this is very much tied into what we're going to be seeing through this whole Mercury retrograde cycle, is people being open and expressive of the things that they desire and are connected to very passionately. Okay. Very, very passionate communication happening during this cycle. So if you have any questions further about understanding Mercury, or if you want me to answer in the comments down below at this point in the video, make sure you just type them down below. Or again, you can always send me an email at Makayla@scenicgridastrology.com, and you can always book a reading with me as well. My website is scenicgridastrology.com, or send me an email and we can schedule something for you. So that being said, I'll get into the whole retrograde. So the shadow began on July 17th, and the shadow period is essentially, it is a part of the retrograde period, and it is the point where Mercury will go retrograde back to and station and then go direct. And we always want to track this part of the shadow, because the themes, the people, the situations that come up starting from that date are a part of that whole longer cycle, that whole Mercury retrograde cycle. Okay. So from like July 17th all the way down to the August 28th, when Mercury moves direct, that's a very long Mercury retrograde cycle that we're going to be dealing with. Right. And also you can expect communication delays, email delays. My thing is go with the flow. These things are needing to happen for a reason. Don't get frustrated with it. If your car breaks down, or like I need to get an oil change, which is a little bit earlier than I thought it needed to get done. But again, you don't get frustrated with these things. Just trust that the universe is actually aligning you to where you need to go, what you need to be doing, where you need to be, right? Like a perfect example is like, maybe that email got kicked back for a reason, because maybe you worded something differently than you meant to, and you need to go back and revise your email, or else you would have offended your boss or something like that, right? Or maybe, you missed out on something very specific that you needed to communicate and you didn't get to communicate it appropriately or something, right? Just try to think into the deeper layer and the level of why that's coming up for you right during this time, because it's aligned. It's supposed to be in your face for a reason. Okay. It's basically showing you a pattern of behavior, if you will, that needs to be looked at, needs to be revisited. Right. And it's no shame, there's no judgment, there's no guilt or whatever. It's just like, hey, we could do a little bit better here. Right. So so the shadow period was July 17th. And then shortly after that, on July 21st, because I'm recording this a a couple of days later, July 23rd, we had the full moon in Capricorn. Okay. And if you haven't checked out my full moon video in Capricorn, that was essentially, it was very deep, and I encourage you to actually go and watch it, because the themes of that are very relevant to what's happening right now. But a lot of that was about breaking up patterns that are keeping you stagnant from really discovering your true alignment and your true path, and removing boundaries that are keeping you boxed in, and creating new ones that are more maybe innovative for your future, right? Or more liberating, if you will, for your future. Okay. And there was a lot. And also prioritizing the people and the relationships in your life that do or do not serve you a sense of like safety, nurturance, security in your life, and most importantly, integrity and respect. Okay. Because going forward with the alignment that we got coming up, the eclipses, the Pluto and Aquarius and stuff, you really want to be solid with the communities that you're involved in and the people that you want to take forward into your future with. Okay. Because they're a part of a bigger unfolding and a bigger tapestry. And it's really important that we're connected to the right people for our soul at this point. So after that, on July 26th, I'm going to pull up the chart so it's easy for people to see. Here we go. Just now. And I have it set to 0 degrees Aries because it does not matter when we're just talking about transits. And this is a easier way for me to just like talk about where all the planetary energies are and so forth for everybody, and show you on the map. So anyway, on July 26th, we're going to have, Mercury's in Virgo, and it's going to be in conjunct Pluto. Okay. You can see down here, Mercury and Virgo making an in conjunction to Pluto. And, this is a pretty significant day because, while you're dealing with all of these Mercury functions, the in conjunction to Pluto is always an adjustment aspect, right? It's asking us to essentially process and make a adjustment that we didn't really see coming. And because it's dealing with Pluto here, a part of it is about assimilating a new objective opinion about, your life, your reality at this point in time, like taking in more information and processing it. But Mercury is now in Virgo. Okay. So it's yin, right? It's in that yin earth practical space. It's more inward. And this in conjunction to Pluto could give you like an unexpected sense of insight that you didn't have, right? Something that shifts the pattern for you, something that gives you a new structural perception of like where you're going, or how you feel about this relationship at this point, or how you feel about your job, or, how you feel about this group that you're connected to. Okay. Essentially this day to me just kind of lit up this unexpected power dynamic as well, right? Like you might get communication coming in from somebody of authority, or somebody who has some sense of power in your life, or like a subconscious undercurrent of like uncomfortability, like something you don't like haven't wanted to actually process, or a piece of information that you haven't maybe like thoroughly, you kind of sensed it, but then it comes out of nowhere, it comes unexpected out of nowhere, and it's kind of revealed to you. This could be a day like that where you have to make an adjustment, right, on your critical thinking that you're doing internally for yourself. Okay. Because we cannot control what's happening outside of us. We cannot control other people's actions, but we can control our own reactions and how we feel and how we take in that information, and essentially what we are taking in is a truth or a not truth, right? And it's very important that I think people right now are using these tools of astrology or spiritual coaching, human design, like whatever tools you're using to create your own sense of empowerment, like deep sense of empowerment. unwavering self-empowerment. Okay. That is the most important thing I always want, my subscribers to take away is like, this is about you and your journey. Okay. You can take or leave whatever I say. You can take some of it, you can take all of it, whatever. Right. But sometimes some things are helpful and sometimes they're not. And I don't always agree with everything that my teachers say. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'm like, well, but, and that's essentially what Mercury's function is to do anyway, right? It's to gather information. And while we're going through this whole transit, I do need to point out too that we've got Mars and Jupiter in Gemini, right? And very soon after, we're going to experience this Mars, Jupiter, and Gemini conjunction. Okay. And Mars and Gemini, people are going to back up their actions with what they say. Okay. And when Mars approaches Jupiter, the closer it gets to Jupiter, especially with the conjunction, and then afterwards, the disseminating, the new phase of the conjunction, people are going to, their opinions and their thoughts are going to be amplified. And they're going to want to take action on it too. Okay. So we want to be careful of arguments. We want to be careful of us being like overly opinionated and pushy on other people. When Mercury's in Virgo, it's really asking you to do this internal process. And that's why it's going to go retrograde during this time too, right? It's like, pull it back, right? We can separate like other people's truths from our truths because there's a lot of duality happening with Mars and Jupiter and Gemini. Okay. There's a lot of ideas. And when Jupiter is in Gemini, Jupiter sometimes can represent like a very dogmatic, this is like a lower expression of Jupiter, right? But it can show up as a very dogmatic sense of truth. And so you can imagine now Gemini, like scattered mass amounts of scattered people's truths that are coming from like a dogmatic sense. And then you just throw this planet of aggression and aggravation and agitation sometimes, right? In there, Mars essentially in there. Okay. So that's why, this whole retrograde cycle, it can be very empowering for the self, but we also want to be mindful that, be a little bit more humbled as well, right? And that's why Virgo is also there to remind us that we can be loud and proud and feel and express ourselves in the Leonic way that we're supposed to. But then we eventually reach Virgo, which is like, okay, well, like now we have to refine it and humble and have these humbling experiences, because after that, we move into Libra, which is to share with other people and to listen, more importantly, when we reach Libra dynamics, right? And so there's a lot going on here, and a lot of duality in the sky that's going to be causing like a little bit of chaos, right? Like, and maybe not too much chaos, but a little bit more of like scattered opinions, ideas, reflections, thoughts being shared, and information just being shared. Okay. Like the social media and the news is probably just going to be crazy for the next couple of weeks. So we have 26th, we have that. And then on August 4th, we're just going to move the chart forward a few days. Let's stop this. We have this new moon in Leo, and I'm obviously going to hopefully put out a video on the new moon in Leo. I do like this one a lot. There is some, things to watch out for, like the squares, like the Saturn Jupiter square. But I'm looking at this as a very positive transit, and the sun and the moon are going to be squaring Uranus, and on that day, Venus is squaring Uranus. So, this is an interesting new moon, but I'm just pointing it out because right after the new moon happens, which is planting a seed of, self-enjoyment, self-expression, living out your purpose, right? Taking up some space to shine your creativity and your creative gifts out in the world, right? Right after that, Mercury goes retrograde the day after, on August 5th. And it's sometime in the later afternoon. Yes, I got 2:38 here. So somewhere around mid-afternoon East Coast time, that Mercury will go retrograde. at 4 degrees and 5 minutes of Virgo. Okay. So now becomes that process of like pulling in an inward self-reflection. And also there's an acceleration that goes on with retrograde periods. Okay. So we're going to have that retrograde. And the reason why that new moon was important the day before is because this is actually now Mercury goes retrograde and goes back into Leo. Okay. So Mercury already went through its part in Leo, right? It began its shadow period at 21 Leo. So it's picking up stuff around, how do I express myself, right? How do I express, how can I use my Mercury function to express my creativity, my potential, right? What do I desire? What's coming from the heart, right? A lot of artists can use that time to put their work out there more, or at least start on a project or, something that's really lighting them up, that's really motivating them, because it's really bringing them a sense of enjoyment and fun and pleasure and joy. Okay, it's Mercury and Leo functions like that. But then a lot of people also, including myself, including maybe you as an individual, feel this sense to express themselves even bigger and louder than they might normally do, right? Because that's just kind of what Leo does, right? It performs, right? It wants to show up and perform. And it also wants an audience. And there's nothing wrong with that, because Leo does, at its very core, need validation. Okay, it does. It's not a negative thing. It's just that Leo performs. Okay, Leo is here to be expressive and show the world creative potential. But it needs an audience for that, right? And it likes an audience for that. The key here to understand with Mercury in Leo and leading up to that new moon in Leo is that, yes, like, is validation important from others? 100%. This is why Leo and Aquarius are opposite each other, right? Because one can't live without the other, right? But at the end of the day, we understand that not everyone's going to like your work. Not everyone's going to like your opinion, right? Not everyone is going to, be impressed by, your dance that you did, or like this, drawing that you made or whatever, right? So the self-validation is more important at the end of the day, right? And like the reason why you're saying the thing, or the reason why you're making the art, right? The reason why, what is the intention between the opinion that you're sharing, or the information that you're sharing, right? Or even the information that you're choosing to collect to integrate into yourself and your soul, up on your journey right now, right? What is the intention behind that? So it's very important to pay attention to this. Okay, because now when Mercury dips into Virgo, we internalize that process, right? We take all that big, loud, expressive communication and energy you've been working with, and then we refine it and we define it and we make it a little bit more humble, and we take and leave some stuff, right? And we realize that validation isn't necessary from the exterior, isn't always a great thing, and we can internalize our own sense of validation, right? And lean into the Virgo qualities of self-compassion and self-acceptance, right? Those are the real healing dynamics of Mercury and Virgo. So you can see how we're flip-flopping back and forth, right, between this whole retrograde period. It's a lot, but it's really important, especially building yourself up to a whole 20 years of Pluto and Aquarius, where your creativity is going to constantly be challenged by Pluto and Aquarius, right? It's going to constantly be meeting power dynamics and validation issues and so forth, right? So we're working on being like really strong, empowered versions of our sun, right? And this is why this Mercury retrograde is important right now. So let's move forward to August 17th, which was another day I wanted to bring up because Mercury is going to be squaring Uranus. So again, here Uranus is in Taurus, dealing with breaking up, chopping up, shaking up, liberating, areas of self-value. And also I want to really point out, this is like a type of transit, the square to Uranus. It's like, Mercury has it functions well with the archetype of Uranus, with Aquarius, because Mercury is exalted in Aquarius, right? So it could be challenging mentally. However, you can use this to liberate your thought process, right? To really break a pattern. If self-worth is an issue right now, right? You can really use this transit to break down and break apart any conditioning, right? And this comes down to like functioning, like what do you deem is like for your survival moving forward? And I don't mean like we're way beyond living in tents and tribes and survival meant, you know, going out and hunting food and having that kind of shelter, right? Survival sometimes now is really having confidence to go out and navigate in the world, to show up for yourself, to take a stand for yourself, you know, to to have your own freedom of expression. Voting, for instance, right, is a survival, a way to think about this, right? Your opinions, because the opinions of the masses is what matters when we look at it from the governmental structure, right? Those people aren't in power if it's not for the opinions of the masses. And to me, our speech, our freedom of speech is really important. It's an important personal value for me from a survivalistic sense, because, you know, hundreds of years ago, women didn't have that power. Like we didn't have the freedom to speak. We didn't have the right to speak, right? So breaking down rigid patterns, stuck patterns, things that aren't necessary for our survival anymore, right? That's really what this square can be like. And on a personal level, again, it's like, what are you processing and what do you think logically is really important for you and is a value for you right now? And it can do with relationships too. And like, what do you need, right? Essentially, what do you need in order for you to have self-validation, to bring more joy, to have more freedom in your life, and so forth. And so a day like this day can be an opportunity for you to like get really clear. And with the square, sometimes people are like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because they realize, okay, if I break this pattern, now I'm going to launch forward. I don't know where that launch is going to take me, but I know it can launch forward to something. Or some people have a fear in that stuckness, and so they don't, right? And they fight it. And when you fight it, and when you fight things that you know are necessary for your soul, and you're still bucking the current, you're still fighting it, you know, that's when you come against things like frustration and bitterness and anger and disappointment. Okay, so you want to lean in. You really want to lean in under this Mercury retrograde and understand, like, where are these dynamics coming up for you? Where are you feeling? If you do feel frustration or anger or bitterness, you know, or disappointment, follow that thread, right? Use this Mercury function to logically think and follow that thread down to like, where is the baseline of this actually coming from? Because it's usually not the obvious thing. It trickles down deeper and deeper and deeper. Okay. And also, like, if you're having a hard time getting there, like, make a reading with astrologer, you know, make a reading with like, I can help, right? Like a spiritual coach, an astrologer, or a human design reader or something, you know, because these are like critical times, right, to be working these dynamics out within our journeys. And at the same time, Saturn and Jupiter have a square. And I just really like this Saturn Jupiter square. You know, I know that they always on the bigger scale bring up, and especially if you've read Cosmos and Psyches by Richard Tarnas, you know, there's so much juicy information, and that is his work, to do like the mundane astrology and study the, you know, the political spheres and stuff. And it's a really good resource for astrologers. I personally like to focus more on the evolutionary emotional intent of an individual, because I think that's like what's really needed. But, you know, this Jupiter Saturn square can really be about, on the backdrop, right, of what we just talked about with the Mercury Uranus square, on the backdrop is like, now it's your time to transcend yourself, right? Transcend boundaries, right? Create massive change, like quantum leaps in your psyche, like quantum leaps in your soul's evolution and in your soul's growth, right? You can really start to transcend time and accelerate. Okay. And again, like I said, we've got like a lot of retrograde planets. And when we have retrograde planets, it is an acceleration of soul growth. We feel it's like a slingshot. We feel like we're not moving or making a lot because there's so much going on internally. But then once those planets start to go direct, it's like letting go that slingshot. And when other things are moving forward, you're just got so much momentum now from that slingshot being pulled back. You're like, and you're right there up with all of the other planets that never went retrograde. Okay. It can feel like that jolting, when we really take the time to be present with the space and the transits that we're given and doing that work. Okay. Then on August 18th, Mercury and Sun conjunct together. Again, this is a important transit because you're essentially fusing together, now the creative self-expression, right? The desires, the stuff that's coming from the heart space, you're fusing it together and you're planting a new seed essentially with the planet that deals with our mind, right? Our mercurial function of information and so forth. And so this is an opportunity when we can really use, like I said earlier, the mind and the body, right? The heart, the body, the soul, with the mind, we could really create a fusion together at that point and be like, okay, I've processed a lot, right? Probably a little bit more to go, but like now I've done like a bunch of realizing and reworking and blah, blah, blah. And now I can integrate it, and make this new internal process. Because again, Mercury's retrograde into the sun and begin to move forward. And then the next day, this is like a clump, because we have the full moon in Aquarius on the next day, and it is going to be square Uranus. And so we'll get there. I'll have a video out on this full moon. But I wanted to point out that August 17th, 18th, and 19th, be flexible. Okay, be flexible. There's a lot of just sudden shifts and changes, like throwing Uranus in there and then a full moon in Aquarius, and it's always a surprise of some sort. And these are fixed signs. They don't, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo don't like to change, right? They will just stay where they are until they literally cannot stay where they are anymore. And I know this because I have a lot of fixed placements in my chart and I can be very stubborn. And we're here to hold a season, right? That's essentially what it is. We're like, well, no, I'm not changing because this works, right? But then it doesn't work, and you have to come to terms with that. And so like a full moon like this can be unexpected shifts, unexpected changes. Again, it's definitely like an emotionally stimulating few days, right? Because especially when you throw the moon in there in Aquarius, be flexible with what other people are going through as well. Okay. We don't want to sever ties because all this stuff is going on and the nervous system can be going through a lot. So especially with the Mercury squaring this Uranus, like this whole time, and all the Gemini energy and the Mars in Gemini and Jupiter in Gemini and so forth, and the Mars Jupiter conjunction squaring Saturn, like there can be a lot of stimulation the end of August through people's nervous systems in mental spaces. And with a retrograde too, people might not be communicating what they're going through. So the same self-compassion and acceptance that you should hopefully be allowing and having space and room for yourself just around this time frame too. Just know that it's probably best to understand that other people are also feeling this intensity too. Okay. And we should be mindful of that and just be more flexible here with how people are reacting, how people are living, right, their life right now during this time. Then on August 28th, let's move this forward a little bit. Mercury is going to move direct, thank God, at 21 degrees of Leo. And it's going to clear its whole post retrograde shadow period on September 11th, right? And so that's kind of like the big finale here and so forth. So Mercury will go direct in Leo. And again, at this point, we're going to be integrating, okay? Integrating. Whenever, you know, a planet goes through, think of this, when a planet has its retrograde period, right? It goes through and it's picking up all the things that we're going to assimilate and deal with and look at and blah, 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 right? And it's in front of us. And then it goes retrograde, and then we have to revise it. We have to rework it. New perspectives, right? New ways of looking at things, new information coming in, right? And then it goes direct again, and that's like our integration period, okay? Now we've picked up everything. There might be, you know, a couple like pieces left on the floor that we missed, you know, the first time going back and forth, but you know, that's really integrating everything that we've been processing and working through over the last couple of weeks, okay? And eventually it's going to move back into Virgo. Mercury will move back into Virgo, and that's when we begin the refining process. And it's really going to be prepping for when Mercury goes into Libra and it's ready to listen to what everybody else went and experienced during this whole retrograde cycle, okay? A couple of things that I wanted to point out is that, you know, because there's so much Leo energy involved in here, we're in Leo season, Mercury will be in Leo, and then in Virgo, you know, I think it's important to understand that, you know, you as an individual are a part of this like big orchestra going on in life. Okay. The world itself is a huge symphony, and you are one of the musicians and you are one of the players. And so your creative potential and self-expression matters, and your individual purpose is separate from every single body else on this planet, and it is a part of that orchestra, right? It's a part of the symphony that's playing, and it's needed, okay? Every musician is needed, essentially. And so your greatest gift that you can bring into this world is to continue to be your individual self, free of judgment from other people, free of needing validation except for your own self-validation and self-worth, and constantly building on that, right? And constantly living out what you want to do, what your purpose, what your intention is, right? Where your body, where your soul is guiding you, okay? It's a time to understand that our intention is everything when it's guiding our life. You know, why am I doing a thing? Why am I called to this? Why am I called to that? And then the work is just the reminder of the intention. Okay. So, you know, my intention with astrology is because a few things, you know, it gives me freedom, it gives me liberation, and it gives me a sense of self-empowerment. And when I can gift that to other people and I can see how much joy it brings to them when they discover themselves in a deeper way, in a deeper layer, and then their consciousness levels rise, and it's a beautiful unfolding, right? It's like a flower constantly blooming and like over and over again. And, you know, my intention is, you know, for my own health and wellness and journey, and also being able to share something that has it's given me such a sense of empowerment and sense of joy, and bringing that out into other people, you know, while also allowing me. So the work is also, you know, just a reminder of the intention. Okay. Because when I do a reading, for instance, or I get a phone call, like one of my clients, Jenny, love you, who gave me a beautiful phone call the other day and left me a beautiful voicemail and stuff, right? The work becomes the reminder, right, of the intention. And it becomes this process, right? And so we are creative individuals. We all have Leo in our chart. We all have a sun sign, right? And we all have a fifth house, and we all have layers to be self-expressive and creative, and we're meant to play, right? And so I think society as a whole is also moving towards more of like, okay, the old paradigm doesn't work anymore. Nobody likes this anymore. Like everyone wants more playtime. Everyone wants to be more happy, more free, have joy. And there's a major uplift, right, in consciousness on the planet. And that's why so many crazy things are happening, right? But they're good because that means we're actually moving towards and being an agent of change. Okay. So, and the last thing is that I had thought was like, this Mercury retrograde period might bring up confrontation, just because all these planets will be opposing Pluto at one point or another in Aquarius. And it's the artists who have always, the artists who have made really big impacts in their generations have always been rebellious, right, in their creative self-expression, and always a little bit outside of the box or a little bit more weird, or, but essentially they're just like authentic, right? And they're breaking boundaries and they're transcending time, right? Like I talked about the Jupiter Saturn square and stuff. So if you're ever in a place where you're doubting yourself during this retrograde period, of your self-expression, of your creativity, of your potential, of your journey, of the path that you're wanting to go on, just remember that like the people who actually have always like made a long, like lasting impact and created change in society and revolution and essentially move society forward, they are the ones that usually go outside of the norms with their creative sense of self and break boundaries, right? And they do it from a heart-centered intention, right? It's because they were driven to do the thing. All right. And so I hope that helps you somewhat as well. If you have stayed for the end of this video, I appreciate you. Please do not forget to give me a like. It helps my channel grow. Please share this with other people if you think it would be helpful. And if you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, I don't post a lot, but I do post, and I hope that you subscribe to my channel and you're a part of my community. And I will be back again soon, guys. Everybody, good luck for the Mercury retrograde. And also, if you would like a reading, you know where to find me. It's in the show notes below, but you can email me, Makayla@scenicgridastrology.com, or you can go to my website, scenicgridastrology.com, or you can find me on Instagram. Okay. I will be back.